Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I will share my time with my colleague Rick Dykstra. I'll let Rick ask the first question.
I thought that's what I heard. So we will start with Mr. Dykstra and then go over to Mr. Lam.
Mr. Mansur, we had a bit of an issue in our last committee meeting where there was discussion around an individual's views pertaining to those who should or should not come to the country. And 3 times during your presentation, you raised the issue of you think we should not be allowing any more Muslims to come to this country, number one. And number two, you've indicated that we should be lowering the number of those that we allow into the country. So I'm assuming that your basis of belief in the first part, which is to restrict individuals from coming to this country because of their belief or because of their upbringing or because of their culture or their lifestyle, that by lowering the number we would actually have the ability to do that?
Well, I believe the numbers that we have, and because of the limitation of time, I was not getting into numbers here, but I understand it's somewhere around about 300,000 if we take in the question of those who are coming in as legal immigrants that have gone through the process, including refugee claimants, including
it's about 250,000, but continue.
So that's the number. And what I'm suggesting, that is not only such unprecedented numbers, and that raises the whole problem of absorptive capacity, and the absorptive capacity has not only to do with economic situation, particularly in the time period that we're living since 2008, but in the larger question of what it means for our country to remain a liberal democracy. This is a question, I believe, through my study, that we have to confront as the Europeans are confronting today. We are only just a few years behind what is happening in Europe right now. That's the concern from which I'm speaking to you, sir.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, your view of a liberal democracy was represented by 6 liberal prime ministers. I'm assuming you didn't mean liberalism in that effect. You meant liberalism in terms of our rights and responsibilities and obligations as Canadians. Just one further, then, I just would like you to clarify for me why you believe that from a Muslim faith perspective, that they're going to have or going to be a detriment to our liberal Canadian democracy here in Canada, or at least the structure upon which you frame the term liberal.
Well, it is, as I understand it, as a practicing Muslim and coming from a background that is the background of Islamic society.
Well, just because you're a practicing Muslim doesn't necessarily mean you can say who can and who can't come to this country.
No, I didn't say that, and that was not what you asked me, how do I think, so that's what I was raising to answer you.
Okay.
And that's the question. That is, the cultural context from which the population is coming is a cultural context that is in many ways antithetical to the values that represents a liberal democracy such as ours or in Western Europe. So the overarching issue is that these numbers are challenging our own system of a culture. Liberal democracy is a culture. I don't think that too many of us talk about this. I'm here talking about this as a political philosopher and academic, sir, so I'm sharing with you my concern. We are a culture, a liberal democracy, and that culture is based upon certain very fundamental assumptions. And those assumptions are unique in history. And the critical core assumption is about individual freedom. Now, there are cultures, in fact, most of the cultures around the world are not liberal democratic.
Agreed. But you make one assumption, and that is the big core assumption that you make in your philosophical argument, at least from my perspective, is that you're assuming that our liberal democracy, what it is to be Canadian, cannot withstand the input from the Muslim community from around the world. I would argue that the reason we are so good as a country and why 1 billion out of 7 billion people want to come here is because and I guess this is where you and I fundamentally disagree, and that is that we actually have a core belief, a core understanding of what it is to be Canadian, and there are 1 billion people around this world that seek to entertain that same kind of lifestyle, that same kind of belief, that same kind of democracy, that same kind of charter and rights of freedoms that we enjoy here.
Have I the time to reply?
Yes, you do.
Well, you're speaking to one of them sitting right across from you, sir. So I don't know whether you know the other side from where the demand comes. I know it from the other side. And I know, and that's why I said in my conclusion, I know what the opposite is, and why I so greatly value what is Canada. and what I greatly value, liberal democracy. Based
That's
on
the dichotomy for me, because you are saying that others don't have the ability to become the Canadians as we see it, but you have that ability to do so.
No, I say it because it is a question of where we have gone in the last 40 years. In 2011, we celebrated the 40th anniversary of the official policy of multiculturalism. I've written a book about it, and I would invite you to read that book, sir.
I do share some of your views on multiculturalism.
Yeah, right.
We don't share the same view.
No, maybe not, but that's what liberal democracy is all about. That's
why
you
I'm okay
invite
with
me and to share that view. So
Absolutely.
it is not about that you impose one value and I impose another value. That's precisely the debate is.
Your concern is, though, that the Muslim community is going to impose a value structure and system here that will overreach, overarch, and overtake ours.
Well, I would argue that we have to be ostriches not to realize what is happening around the world. And we have to be ostriches that we do not understand that the demands coming from the organized Muslim community is for values to be accepted in a liberal democracy that is thoroughly incompatible with liberal democracy. I'm referring here to the demands of the Sharia implementation. We came very close to having that implemented or opened up in Ontario. We're seeing that's what's happening in Europe. This is not simply an isolated thing. And as I pointed out to you, sir, we might disagree on the issue, but this phenomena is a global phenomena that we are discussing globally. We're not only discussing within Canada. We cannot say that Canada is an island by itself and unto itself and is unaffected by the global phenomenon.
Thank you, Salim. My apologies. You actually have 2 more minutes.
I do?
Yeah.
Oh.
Gift.
Rick, good to go?
Yeah, I actually, that's an interesting observation. Our previous 2 witnesses, well, one in particular sitting in your chair, argued about the fact that by keeping all of the records that we do, we can't really prove whether we've actually kept somebody bad out. And I think you're actually presenting the other side of that argument, which is, it's very hard to judge who we may have kept out, because the last thing CSIS or for that matter in terms of a North American agreement with the United States, the acknowledgments publicly of those who we kept out are not necessarily those that we should make public. Right. And I think you're making a pretty strong argument that we do need, with respect to security, a certain semblance of order and specifics around what that intelligence collection is all about. So I guess just maybe giving you an opportunity to pursue that a little bit further in terms of acknowledging that, look, we need a system in place that is going to have its checks and balances in order to keep our country safe.
Yeah, I agree, sir. My time is up.
Oh, no, you got 30 seconds.
Yes. Well, I got it brief.
Well, I agree. I mean, we need to have the checks and balances in place. The human intelligence is extremely important, and we are all of us know that the demand side is far greater than the resource side available. So how do we cut the resources for all the demands that is out there?
Right.
Thank you very much.